For millennia, the Bible has been revered by billions as the inspired Word of God, a sacred text filled with moral guidance, historical accounts, and prophecies, predictions that allegedly prove its divine origin. Prophecy, in particular, holds a special place in the hearts of believers. It's often cited as undeniable evidence that the Bible is more than just ancient literature, but rather a book inspired by an omniscient deity. Many argue that the fulfillment of biblical prophecies validates not only the existence of God, but also the authority of Scripture itself. But what if those prophecies aren't as reliable as they seem? A closer examination of key biblical prophecies reveals a pattern of failure, reinterpretation, and, in some cases, outright contradiction with historical evidence. When these prophecies are scrutinized with a critical eye and compared against historical records, a different picture emerges, one that casts doubt on the infallibility of these ancient predictions. In this video, we'll take a hard look at some of the most famous biblical prophecies, dissecting them one by one to see whether they stand up to scrutiny. If these prophecies truly failed, then the idea of divine inspiration comes into question. Let's begin by counting down the most prominent failed prophecies, starting with a particularly bold prediction about the destruction of a powerful ancient city. The first failed prophecy on our list, the destruction of Tyre by Nebuchadnezzar. Ezekiel, a prophet writing during the Babylonian exile, made a bold and detailed prediction about the fate of the ancient Phoenician city of Tyre. Found in Ezekiel 26 verses 7 to 14, the prophecy declares that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, would utterly destroy Tyre, leaving it in ruins and ensuring that it would never be rebuilt. The language is vivid, painting a picture of complete desolation, with walls torn down, towers toppled, and the city scraped clean like a bare rock where only fishermen would spread their nets. It's an unmistakable and highly specific prediction. Yet history tells us a different story. Tyre was indeed besieged by Nebuchadnezzar around 585 BCE, a campaign that lasted 13 long years. However, the siege didn't end in total destruction as Ezekiel predicted. Nebuchadnezzar managed to conquer the mainland portion of Tyre, but the island city, the most important part of Tyre, remained intact. This outcome is corroborated by historical accounts from ancient historians such as Josephus, who drew from Phoenician and Babylonian sources. Further evidence comes from Alexander the Great's famous siege of Tyre in 332 BCE. By then, Tyre was still a thriving city, proving that it had not been reduced to a barren rock as Ezekiel predicted. In fact, Alexander had to construct a massive causeway to reach the island fortress, a feat that would have been unnecessary if Tyre had already been left in ruins by Nebuchadnezzar. The fact that Tyre continued to exist and even thrive well into the Roman period, and still exists today as part of modern Lebanon, directly contradicts Ezekiel's prophecy that it would never be rebuilt. Modern archaeology supports this historical narrative. Excavations at Tyre have uncovered layers of continuous occupation, showing that the city was never entirely abandoned. Notably, scholars such as Sabatino Moscati and H.J. Katzenstein, in their works on Phoenician history, highlight the resilience of Tyre through various conquests, further debunking the idea that it was permanently destroyed. Despite attempts by apologists to reinterpret the prophecy, the evidence remains clear. Nebuchadnezzar did not destroy Tyre in the way Ezekiel described, and the city was not left in a state of permanent desolation. The prophecy is an example of a clear and specific prediction that failed when tested against historical fact. As we proceed through this countdown, we'll see that the problem of unfulfilled or failed prophecies is not isolated. Instead, we find evidence of Egypt's continued activity and engagement in regional politics during the supposed period of desolation. Had such a catastrophic event occurred, it would have been widely documented by surrounding cultures given Egypt's prominence in the ancient world. Furthermore, archaeological records and ancient texts from neighboring regions, such as those of the Assyrians and Persians, make no mention of a 40-year period during which Egypt was uninhabited. The failure of this prophecy not only undermines Ezekiel's credibility as a prophet, but also calls into question the infallibility of biblical prophecy as a whole. Despite Ezekiel's vivid description of Egypt's downfall and desolation, history tells a different story, one of resilience and continuity. Ultimately, this prophecy stands as another example of a bold biblical prediction that failed to materialize. Additionally, works like A History of Ancient Egypt by Nicholas Grimal provide detailed accounts of Egypt's history during the relevant period, showing no indication of desolation or displacement. The Babylonian chronicles provide a reliable account of Nebuchadnezzar's campaigns, and archaeological studies of ancient Egyptian cities offer a wealth of data on continuous habitation. This is all verifiable evidence. Grab notes that while Ezekiel's predictions about other nations, such as Babylon's rise to power, were based on contemporary geopolitical trends, they frequently failed when it came to long-term outcomes. Egypt remained a significant and continuously inhabited civilization throughout this period, maintaining its political structure and economy. While his forces likely raided parts of Egypt, there is no evidence to suggest that he managed to devastate the entire country, let alone render it uninhabited for 40 years. Historically, Nebuchadnezzar did campaign against Egypt around 568 BCE, as noted in Babylonian records such as the Babylonian Chronicles. No foot of man shall pass through it, and no foot of beast shall pass through it. Here's what the text says: Therefore, I am against you, and against your streams, and I will make the land of Egypt an utter waste and desolation, from Migdol to Cien, as far as the border of Cush. It shall be uninhabited for 40 years. The second failed prophecy on our list: Egypt will be desolate for 40 years. Ancient Egypt, a civilization that thrived for thousands of years along the fertile banks of the Nile. In Ezekiel 29 verses 10 to 12, the prophet makes a striking prediction about Egypt's fate. According to the passage, God declares through Ezekiel that Egypt will become a desolate wasteland for 40 years, uninhabited by both humans and animals. The prophecy even specifies that no one will pass through the land during this period of complete devastation. I will make the land of Egypt a desolation in the midst of desolated lands, and her cities shall be a desolation for 40 years among cities that are laid waste. Ezekiel 29 verses 10 to 12, ESV. The prediction is clear and unambiguous. Egypt, a powerful and populous nation, is to be completely desolate for 40 years, with its people scattered among the nations. However, despite its specificity, this prophecy does not align with any known historical events. Let's start with the context. Ezekiel was prophesying during a time when Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar was expanding its empire. It's likely that Ezekiel expected Babylon to conquer Egypt completely, much as it had done to other nations in the region. But this conquest never happened in the way Ezekiel envisioned. In fact, Egypt thrived under subsequent rulers, including during the Persian and later Hellenistic periods. The city of Memphis, which served as a key administrative center, continued to flourish, as did other important cities like Thebes and Elephantine. The Elephantine Papyri, a collection of Jewish manuscripts from a military colony in Egypt during the 5th century BCE, provides further evidence that Egypt was far from desolate during this time. Critics of this prophecy often point to the lack of historical corroboration as the primary reason it is considered a failure. Unlike other ancient prophecies that are vague or symbolic, this one is highly specific, making it easy to test against historical facts. The complete desolation of Egypt for 40 years is an extraordinary claim, one that would require extraordinary evidence. Yet, no such evidence exists. Some apologists attempt to defend this prophecy by suggesting that it might refer to a future event. However, this explanation stretches credibility, as the prophecy was clearly intended to be relevant to Ezekiel's audience at the time. Others propose that it was meant symbolically, but the detailed nature of the prediction, mentioning specific cities and timeframes, makes a purely symbolic interpretation unlikely. In academic circles, scholars like Lester L. Grab, who specializes in ancient Near Eastern history, have pointed out that Ezekiel's prophecies often reflect the political expectations of his time, rather than actual divine insight. The third failed prophecy on our list: the Nile will dry up. Ancient Egypt's very existence depended on the Nile River, a lifeline that sustained its civilization for thousands of years. The river's regular flooding enriched the soil, allowing agriculture to thrive and supporting one of the most advanced ancient societies. Given the importance of the Nile, a prophecy predicting its complete drying up would have signified a catastrophic event unparalleled in history. Yet, this is precisely what the prophet Isaiah claimed would happen. In Isaiah chapter 19, verses 5 to 7, the text reads, "The waters of the Nile will dry up, and the riverbed will be parched and dry. Its canals will become foul, and the branches of Egypt's Nile will diminish and dry up. Reeds and rushes will rot away." This prophecy paints a dire picture: the Nile drying up entirely, canals turning foul, and the surrounding vegetation withering away. It's a detailed and vivid prediction, suggesting a complete environmental collapse in Egypt. However, historical and environmental evidence shows that such an event has never occurred. The Nile has been a continuous and reliable river throughout recorded history. While its annual flooding patterns have varied slightly due to climatic changes, there has never been a period in which the river dried up or ceased to sustain life in Egypt. The regular inundations of the Nile were well documented by ancient Egyptian records, including the Nilometer inscriptions, stone structures used to measure water levels during the flood season. These records indicate that while fluctuations in water levels occurred, the river always continued to flow. Furthermore, modern hydrological studies of the Nile reinforce the fact that its flow has remained consistent over thousands of years. Research conducted by the Geological Society of America in conjunction with climate scientists studying ancient river systems shows that the Nile's flow has been remarkably stable, even during periods of regional drought. The Nile's source, Lake Victoria and other highland regions in East Africa, ensures a steady supply of water, making the river highly resilient to changes in local rainfall patterns. There is also no record in Egyptian history, nor in the annals of neighboring civilizations, of a catastrophic drying up of the Nile. Such an event would have had profound regional and international repercussions, as Egypt was a major trade hub and grain supplier in the ancient world. Its absence from any historical record strongly suggests that Isaiah's prophecy did not come to pass. Some apologists have argued that this prophecy refers to a future event, possibly an apocalyptic scenario yet to occur. However, this interpretation ignores the context of Isaiah 19, which describes the prophecy as a judgment against Egypt during Isaiah's time, implying that it was meant to happen within a historical framework familiar to the original audience. Others attempt to interpret the prophecy symbolically, suggesting that the drying of the Nile represents a metaphor for Egypt's decline. While it's true that ancient prophecies often use symbolic language, this explanation falls short when applied to Isaiah 19, verses 5 to 7, which provides specific and literal details about the river drying up and the ecological impact it would have. In scholarly circles, Isaiah's prophecy is often cited as an example of prophetic hyperbole, exaggerated language used to emphasize the severity of a coming judgment. However, even as hyperbole, the complete drying up of the Nile remains an event without any historical or geological basis. For those interested in examining the evidence, primary sources such as the Nilometer inscriptions provide direct insight into the Nile's historical water levels. Additionally, hydrological studies published by organizations like the Geological Society of America and research papers on ancient river dynamics are valuable resources that confirm the stability of the Nile's flow over millennia. Works like The River Nile in the Post-Classical Period, Geography, Culture and Politics by Tyre offer comprehensive historical analyses of the Nile and its critical role in sustaining Egyptian civilization. Ultimately, the prophecy about the Nile drying up stands as another clear example of a failed biblical prediction. The river that Isaiah claimed would dry up has continued to flow uninterrupted for thousands of years, nourishing Egypt and supporting its people. Far from being a wasteland, the Nile Valley remains one of the most fertile and productive regions in the world. This failure adds to the growing list of prophecies that challenge the notion of divine infallibility, offering further evidence that biblical prophecies, when tested against historical facts, often fall short. The fourth failed prophecy on our list: Damascus will cease to be a city. Damascus, one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities, has a rich and complex history stretching back thousands of years. It has witnessed countless invasions, political upheavals, and cultural shifts, yet it remains a vibrant and significant city in the modern era. However, according to the Bible, Damascus was destined for complete and permanent destruction. Isaiah chapter 17 verse 1 offers one of the most direct prophecies regarding its fate. See, Damascus will no longer be a city, but will become a heap of ruins. This prophecy appears straightforward. Isaiah foretells that Damascus will be reduced to rubble and cease to exist as a city. There is no indication of symbolic language or metaphor here. It is a literal prediction of total destruction and abandonment. Given the specificity of this prophecy, it's easy to test its accuracy against historical and archaeological evidence. Historically, Damascus has endured many wars and sieges, but it has never been permanently destroyed or abandoned. Ancient Assyrian records indicate that Damascus was besieged and conquered by the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III in 732 BCE, an event that may have inspired Isaiah's prophecy. However, Even after this conquest, Damascus continued to exist as a city, albeit under Assyrian control. It was not reduced to a heap of ruins, nor did it cease to function as an urban center. Subsequent empires, including the Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, and Byzantines, all controlled Damascus at various points in history. Despite periods of conflict, the city retained its significance and remained inhabited. During the Islamic conquests of the 7th century CE, Damascus became the capital of the Umayyad Caliphate, further cementing its role as a major political and cultural center. Archaeological evidence supports the continuous habitation of Damascus. Excavations in and around the city have revealed layers of occupation dating back to the 3rd millennium BCE. These findings indicate that while Damascus has undergone numerous transformations, it has never been completely destroyed or abandoned. The city's ancient core, including notable landmarks such as the Umayyad Mosque, stands as a testament to its enduring presence through millennia of history. Some defenders of the prophecy argue that it refers to a future event, suggesting that Damascus will be destroyed during an apocalyptic scenario. This interpretation, however, fails to account for the historical context in which Isaiah's prophecy was made. The language of Isaiah 17 verse 1 implies an imminent judgment, one that was expected to occur within the lifetime of Isaiah's audience. To reinterpret it as a far future event stretches the text beyond its original intent. Others propose that the prophecy was fulfilled symbolically, with the Assyrian conquest representing the ruin of Damascus. Yet this explanation is unsatisfactory, given the literal nature of the prediction. The prophecy does not merely suggest conquest or subjugation, it explicitly states that Damascus will cease to be a city, and will become a heap of ruins. Since the city continued to thrive after the Assyrian conquest, this interpretation fails to align with the actual outcome. In academic circles, scholars like Lester L. Grabb and Philip Davies have noted that many biblical prophecies, including those in Isaiah, reflect the political anxieties and aspirations of their time, rather than divine foreknowledge. Isaiah's prophecy about Damascus likely stemmed from the geopolitical tensions between Israel, Judah, and the powerful Assyrian Empire. The expectation of Damascus's destruction was a common sentiment among the Israelites, who viewed Assyria's military campaigns as a means of divine judgment on their enemies. However, as history shows, these expectations did not materialize as predicted. For those interested in further research, primary sources such as the Annals of Tiglath-Pileser III provide detailed accounts of the Assyrian campaigns, including the siege of Damascus. Additionally, archaeological reports from the Directorate General of Antiquities and Museums in Syria document the continuous occupation and development of Damascus over the centuries. In conclusion, the prophecy that Damascus would cease to be a city and become a heap of ruins stands in stark contrast to historical reality. Despite invasions and periods of conflict, Damascus has persisted as a thriving urban center for over 4,000 years. This failed prophecy highlights another instance where biblical predictions, when tested against the evidence, do not hold up. Rather than being a desolate ruin as Isaiah foretold, Damascus remains one of the oldest and most enduring cities in the world, offering yet more evidence that not all biblical prophecies stand the test of time and historical scrutiny. The fifth failed prophecy on our list. Babylon will be permanently destroyed and never rebuilt. The ancient city of Babylon, a symbol of power and splendor in the ancient world, features prominently in many biblical prophecies. Among them, Isaiah and Jeremiah both predict its complete and permanent destruction. According to these prophets, Babylon would not only be destroyed, but would never again be inhabited, becoming a desolate wasteland for eternity. Isaiah chapter 13 verses 19 to 20 states, "And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pride of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. It will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations. Arabs will not pitch their tents there, and shepherds will not make their flocks lie down there." Jeremiah echoes this prediction in chapter 51 verse 26. "No stone will be taken from you for a corner, and no stone for a foundation, for you will be desolate forever, declares the Lord." These prophecies offer a dramatic picture. Babylon, once the jewel of the ancient world, would suffer utter destruction and remain abandoned forever. However, when we examine the historical and archaeological record, we find that this prophecy did not unfold as predicted. First, while Babylon did experience significant decline and destruction over the centuries, it was never permanently desolate or uninhabited. The city was captured by the Persian king Cyrus the Great in 539 BCE, an event described in the famous Cyrus cylinder, an ancient clay artifact that records Cyrus's conquest of Babylon. Unlike the violent overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah described in the Bible, Babylon was taken without significant bloodshed or destruction. The city continued to function as a major administrative center under Persian rule. Even after subsequent invasions by the Greeks and later empires, Babylon retained some degree of habitation and cultural activity. Alexander the Great, in fact, made Babylon his headquarters and planned to rebuild and restore the city to its former glory before his untimely death in 323 BCE. Following Alexander's death, the city entered a period of decline but was never entirely abandoned. The most compelling evidence against this prophecy's fulfillment comes from archaeological studies of the site of Babylon. Excavations conducted by renowned archaeologist Robert Koldewey in the late 19th and early 20th centuries revealed that Babylon was continuously inhabited in some form well into the early Islamic period. Far from being a completely desolate ruin, the site saw various levels of occupation and use over the centuries. Moreover, during the 20th century, Saddam Hussein famously attempted to reconstruct parts of ancient Babylon as a symbol of Iraqi nationalism. While his reconstruction efforts were criticized by historians and archaeologists for their inaccuracy, they demonstrate that Babylon continued to be a focal point of interest and habitation, directly contradicting the prophecy that it would remain uninhabited forever. Some defenders of this prophecy argue that the prediction was partially fulfilled but awaits complete fulfillment in the future. However, this explanation is problematic for several reasons. First, the language used in Isaiah and Jeremiah clearly implies a total and immediate destruction, likening Babylon's fate to that of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were utterly destroyed in a single cataclysmic event. Second, the claim that the prophecy remains unfulfilled after more than 2,500 years undermines its relevance to the original audience, who would have expected its fulfillment in their lifetime or soon afterward. Another common defense is that the prophecy was symbolic, referring to the spiritual fall of Babylon rather than its literal destruction. Yet, this interpretation does not align with the detailed and literal descriptions found in the texts, which specifically mention physical desolation and abandonment. In academic circles, scholars such as Edwin M. Yamauchi and Lester L. Grab have pointed out that many biblical prophecies, particularly those concerning foreign nations, reflect the geopolitical anxieties of their time rather than divine foresight. The prophets likely expected Babylon to fall dramatically due to the rising power of Persia, but they did not anticipate that it would continue to exist and evolve under successive empires. For those who wish to explore the evidence further, Koldewey's excavations at Babylon are well documented in his seminal work, The Excavations at Babylon. Additionally, the Cyrus cylinder held in the British Museum provides an invaluable primary source on the Persian conquest of Babylon and the city's subsequent fate. In conclusion, the prophecy regarding Babylon's permanent destruction and desolation is another example of a failed biblical prediction. Contrary to the vivid and absolute language used by Isaiah and Jeremiah, Babylon was not destroyed in a single catastrophic event, nor has it remained uninhabited forever. Instead, it continued to play an important role in history long after the time of these prophecies, serving as a testament to the limitations of prophetic accuracy. This failure underscores a broader pattern of unmet predictions in the Bible, further challenging the claim of divine infallibility. If you enjoy our content, we'd love your support. By joining one of our channel memberships, you help us continue creating videos like this one while gaining access to some amazing perks. As a member, you'll unlock exclusive content available only to supporters, earn loyalty badges to show off in comments and live chats, and enjoy priority responses to your comments, shoutouts, and more. The best part? Memberships start at just $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee. Even small contributions make a big difference for the PJ Bible TV team in covering production costs and delivering the content you love. And if you're not ready to become a channel member today but still want to support us, there are other ways to help. Engaging with our videos is a tremendous way to show your support. By taking just a few moments to like the video, share it with friends, family, or on social media, and leave a comment, you're telling the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people. Your support, no matter how you choose to show it, means the world to us. Thank you for being part of the PJ Bible TV community.